Hey, it's good to hear from you too. I wanted to ask you your opinion on something. So I want to do the nerdy news rundown on this Bloomberg article, all about how Star Wars is not really resonating with young people. But I know how Star Wars fans are, man. They're going to jump all over me. People are going to say, like, don't be negative, don't cover that. What do you think?
Do it. They doubted you on Star Wars Sunday when you brought up these problems.
Yeah, no, I know. But what about the people that are like, hey, look, it's not as big of a deal. You shouldn't really run with it. Focus on the positive stuff, Josh. I hear that all the time from people. Do you think I should listen to them?
Those people can go themselves.
All right, I guess we're going to go with it.
It's like the news, but for nerds.
Today's shout out goes to Nasir Ali. Indeed, Khonshu is the god that Moon Knight gets his powers from. Make sure you stay to the end of this video where we will ask another nerd card question. What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday to you. I'm Josh. Welcome back to the den. And yes, indeed, we have to talk about this Bloomberg article, which just came out yesterday, talking all about how the Disney Star Wars properties are not resonating with young people. Now, if you're new here or you just don't know how this show works, let me put out a few disclaimers for you. First of all, I like Star Wars. I actually like the sequel trilogy. I am not one of those YouTubers or one of those people out there that just bashes on Disney Star Wars all the time for any and every reason. Most of the content I do about Star Wars is crazy fan theories or just getting hyped up about little leaks or things that are coming out. And look for more of those videos on Star Wars Sunday. But this show is the Nerdy News Rundown. We talk about the news out there involved with our favorite nerdy things. What I'm trying to do is talk objectively about this article and about some of the problems that are facing Disney Star Wars as a brand. And the truth is, there are a lot of Star Wars fans out there completely blind to this. And we spoke about this on Star Wars Sunday. There are people that just simply do not believe that there's anything wrong with Star Wars, and they attribute any negativity towards Disney Star Wars as just haters or butthurt fanboys or whatever. So just to be clear, I am not a Star Wars hater. I'm a Star Wars fanboy, but Star Wars, not in a good place. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into the actual article. Now, indeed, this article was posted on Bloomberg yesterday, and this is gonna be making a lot of waves. I've already seen other people covering this article, talking about it, putting their own opinions on it. The usual list of suspects is undoubtedly already working on their anti-Star Wars, the fact that Disney Star Wars is dead and Bloomberg now proves it videos. I'm also sort of trying to cut them off the pass and, maybe get some of the attention of people that are talking about this issue, but then more objectively explain what is actually going on. There are a lot of things that can be true all at once. Let me explain. Star Wars is not dead. It is a strong brand and will always have a strong pull, especially compared to other franchises and brands out there. Also true, however, is the fact that Disney Star Wars is very much underperforming, not only for what Disney wanted it to do, for what their shareholders were expecting it to do, but when you compare it against the other sequels, including the prequels and the original trilogy. Now, the article itself, which I will link for you guys, you should go check it out yourself, but the article is basically split into two different things. It's split into facts and it's split into opinions. And so the first thing I want to do is go over the facts and the opinions that are in this article. I'll sort of talk about my take a little bit. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to sort of deep dive and give you my just authentic, off-the-cuff thoughts about where I think Star Wars is at and where the Disney Star Wars trilogy went wrong. Fact number one, toy sales are down. This is a fact that is in this article, and they're sort of trying to tie it to how this has to do with young people not, accepting the new Star Wars thing. That's more opinion, and we'll get into that in a second. But the bottom line here is, guys, this is just a fact. Star Wars merchandising for the last couple of years has been on a steady decline, and not only is this a decline from what you saw in 2015, which of course was this huge boom of Star Wars, everything Star Wars was coming back, The Force Awakens and all that, but it's actually terribly low when you compare it to the numbers of the prequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy, despite those movies being maligned and not really liked critically, the merchandising numbers for those movies was out of control. It was just simply out of control, and it was also growing, as opposed to what's happening right now, where Star Wars toy sales are dropping off. And there was another article written about this earlier in the year by Bloomberg also, where they're talking about how the CEO of Hasbro basically said that one of the reasons the toy sales were so low for The Last Jedi is because they put the toy sales out way too early. They were trying to sell those toys way too early. And you'll hear a lot of this kind of stuff when talking about the problems with Star Wars. You'll hear people say things like this, like, oh, well, actually, the reason that happened was because we put that out too early, or the reason that happened was because Solo was not not in the correct date, or the reason that the parks are not being attended is because, well, we scared people off. You're basically gonna hear all sorts of like little explanations for that, and I'm sorry, all of those explanations to me are ridiculous. You're talking about Star Wars. You're talking about a brand that should be just crushing it. Like, the conversations out there should not be, the reason that The Last Jedi toy sales were low was because they released them way too early. Oh God, that makes sense. We're fine. No, those conversations should not be going down like that. Instead, they should be like, yo, doesn't matter when we put out these toys. They sell incredibly well. However, had we put them out in a better release schedule, sales might have been even better. That's what should be going on, but it's not. Fact number 2, and I already alluded to it, but it is the lack of attendance for not only the Disneyland park, but particularly the Galaxy's Edge Star Wars attraction. Now, weeks and weeks ago, a lot of people were speculating about this, and there were a ton of videos going around on the internet all about how attendance was low at Galaxy's Edge. Now, I didn't cover it at the time because I wanted to just see how we did for like the rest of the summer, what was actually going on. When the hard numbers start coming in, we'll take a better look at it. And as many of you will know, like, it's at this point undeniable. Like, the park attendance was incredibly low. Bob Iger and Disney actually had a really weird plan to put a reservation system in because they thought Galaxy's Edge was going to be so crazy popular it was like borderline going to break the park. And instead of that, so few people actually came that they scrapped the reservation system incredibly early. They scrapped the policy where they weren't letting people that worked in the park go to Galaxy's Edge way ahead of schedule. Bottom line, people aren't going to Galaxy's Edge. Now, you can make a ton of little arguments here, and this one is a little bit more nuanced than the toy thing, but you can make all these weird little arguments like literally it's too hot, or people just expected it to be too busy so they didn't come. I'm sorry, once again, those conversations are ridiculous to me. This is Star Wars. Like, this is Star Wars theme park. The attendance here should have been crazy, and we could have maybe had little discussions about, hey, had we done this or that, the attendance could have been even better, but holy cow, look at these numbers. Instead, we're legitimately talking about how the Star Wars theme parks created by Disney are literally underperforming. Bottom line, they're underperforming. Another fact brought up in the article is low box office sales. Again, irrefutable. This is a fact. Solo's the first major Star Wars motion picture to come to the silver screen that lost money. Like, not only are we not talking about how, oh man, this movie could have made more money, you know, had this and this happen. No, you're talking about a straight up loss. And not only that, the trend here is really concerning because The Last Jedi, of course, goes down, and you can make little arguments about why that is compared to The Force Awakens, which I think some of those arguments are legit. But then when you look at the Solo box office compared to The Last Jedi, it's literally about half. Like, it's literally less than half the box office of another Star Wars movie. That's insane. So those are the facts in the Bloomberg article. And guys, hopefully hearing it from Bloomberg, or, hearing it from Yahoo Finance or some of these other articles and, junkets and reports out there is a little bit better than just you hearing it from me and taking my word for it. I totally get you guys. You don't want to necessarily take my word for it or anybody on YouTube's word for it. But guys, the evidence is really starting to pile up here. You can't really deny it. Now let's get into the opinions of the article. Now, the article itself is really an opinion piece. It's talking about how the Star Wars and particularly the Disney Star Wars brand has not resonated with young people. That this is mostly to blame for the lack of toy sales and the lack of attendance at the Star Wars theme parks. Now, I think you can make an argument that the toy sales certainly reflect this, that younger people are not spending as much money on the toys, but I would not take this as straight fact because a lot of the toy sales, and this has been the case for Star Wars, including in the prequels, a lot of the toy sales is actually coming from higher demographics, so like 18 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 45. Those demographics actually buy a large portion of Star Wars toys because it's caked into the branding. Like, collecting and being a collector of Star Wars merchandise is caked into the Star Wars brand. Now, I do think it's a fair criticism that Star Wars hasn't really brought in more young people, but I don't think that's really the biggest issue, as I'll get into in a second. Another thing that the article talks about, and this is opinion once again, but the fact that the Star Wars theme parks targeting older fans is partially why the theme parks themselves didn't do very well. To me, this is like a really wild stretch that they do in this article. Like, the fact that you have a cantina and you have adult beverages, and the fact that there are, seemingly attractions that are more adult oriented is just a really silly argument to me, because the Star Wars brand itself is something that's passed on generationally, and a big draw to these parks is going to be, adults that are in a household, that has, an income and it has, little kids and everything, but the adults themselves are likely Star Wars fans. Like, they're probably Star Wars fans that are convincing, the family to go on this trip. They're bringing the young ones to this trip. So I don't think you can really say that like the stumbling of the park is all due to its focus on adult fans. But please, I urge you to go check out the article itself and read it. And honestly, there's a lot of other good places that are talking about this article with a little bit more nuance. It's really interesting. So there's a lot of stuff to check out online. Go check it out and formulate your own opinion, of course. But just to double back on what I was saying, I think the facts, the irrefutable facts that are presented in this article are the fact that the toy sales are down, and there are like a million articles about that. Please just research Star Wars toys sales graph. When you Google that, bunch of incredible articles will come up. The low attendance of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, again, irrefutable fact, ridiculous, not the way it should be for Star Wars as a brand. And the box office, look, Solo lost money. The last Star Wars movie in theaters lost money. Bob Iger literally is restricting the production of Star Wars movies. They took a bunch off the slate. If you don't think that's like canceling movies, you're crazy. Like, look, Bob Iger just had a shareholders meeting on Tuesday, okay? And in the shareholders meeting, he literally announced that mostly because of Fox movies like Stuber and Dark Phoenix losing oodles of money, that Disney's gonna highly restrict the number of movies that Fox is making. Fox went from, I don't know how many movies they make a year, but now they're down to 10 movies, and 5 of those movies per year are gonna be developed for Disney Plus. That's a major downgrade by Disney, because Disney's like, look, there's just not as much trust in these brands don't make as much money, let's restrict the number of movies they're gonna make. And they already did that to Star Wars movies, right? Because you think Star Wars fatigue, that's the problem, restrict those movies. I don't think it is Star Wars fatigue, I think it's something else. Now, let me get into my personal takeaway from why this is happening and why Star Wars as a brand is sort of fumbling. The biggest reason that Disney Star Wars is not doing well is because they fumbled the passing of the baton. The passing of the baton between the OG Star Wars characters and the new era sequel trilogy characters. It was always obvious that we were gonna need new heroes and new characters to root for in a new Star Wars trilogy, but it was also known that you needed to have these original trilogy characters in the movie. That's how you would do it. You would bank on the nostalgia of the old, pass the baton to the new characters. That was so crucial to the success of not only this trilogy, but the Star Wars brand moving forward. Because you have to understand, there's a lot of concern. There's just caked into Disney, the big corporation, owning Star Wars, are a lot of concerns. And it really seems like the priority in Disney Star Wars is sort of shooing away, ending the past, killing off the OG characters, and really trying to uplift these new characters. Look at Galaxy's Edge. Galaxy's Edge primarily focuses on Kylo, Rey, the Resistance, the First Order. Disney has clearly shown that their agenda is to prop up and to focus on the new Disney IP and to focus less and less on the OG properties. And that was a massive mistake. What they should have done is, instead of having this trilogy exist the way that it did, they should have made 6 movies. And the first 3 movies should have focused more on the original trilogy characters and the conflicts and choices that they made that now led us to where we are at now in the sequel trilogy. Imagine if Luke Skywalker working with a young Ben Solo was literally in a movie, and then the turn and, the burning down of the temple, the fall of Kylo Ren. Imagine if that was all in a movie. Imagine if the trouble with Ben Solo and Han and Leia and the way they went their separate ways, imagine if that was in a movie. Imagine if you got Luke Skywalker being the hero that we know him to be, and then watching his greatest failure happen, which is of course the fall of Ben Solo. Imagine if that was in a movie. You would accept the things that happen in the sequel trilogy currently, I think, a lot better. And I almost think, and obviously I can't prove this, but I almost think that there was something in the contract between Lucasfilm and Disney where if Disney had decided to focus more on the original trilogy characters, that maybe merchandising or things within the park or things like that would have saw more money go to George Lucas rather than just come to Disney directly. Because otherwise, their behavior just really doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, they said no to the George Lucas treatments. George had treatments for how he wanted these things to go. And the other big reason that Star Wars is in trouble as a brand, in my opinion, is that because of the fumbling of this passing of the baton, all of the cracks and blemishes and dark parts of Star Wars as a brand that have always been there are now coming to the forefront. There are three platitudes that just exist out there, and they really apply to businesses and brands, and they are that winning solves everything, everyone loves a winner, and sex is the foundation of a good relationship. All right, that last one I kind of threw in there, but I'll explain all of them. Give me 1 second. You see, Star Wars has always had problems, right? Like, there's always been issues with Star Wars, you know, different canonical things that didn't quite match up. I mean, that Leia-Luke kiss, I mean, a little awkward. There's always been strong merchandising caked into the brand, but then when the prequels roll around and you start creating new things kind of simply to sell new merchandise, like, that's a crack, right? That's something that people don't exactly like. So all of the issues that already existed in Star Wars, the reason that people didn't really focus on them or bring them up as much is because Star Wars was winning. It was the biggest brand out there. And as I said, everyone loves a winner. So like, the fact that Star Wars was winning as a brand would actually bring more people to the brand, which is the same thing that happens in the MCU, by the way. Like, the reason the MCU has taken over pop culture is because it was this awesome popular thing, and the late adapters, like the late adapters in this life cycle of this thing, the reason they came over is because it was winning. Everybody wants to be a part of the winning team, part of the formula. And that's what was happening with The Force Awakens. When The Force Awakens came out and was winning, like, dude, Star Wars was bigger than it had ever been. Everywhere you'd go, you see Star Wars this, Star Wars that. Everybody was hype on Star Wars. People were saying, you know, I never really messed with Star Wars before, but I really like this new movie. It's making me go back and appreciate it. I'm a Star Wars fan now. And part of that was because it was the biggest movie ever. It was a winner, and people love a winner. And the third platitude is that a good sex life is the foundation of a good relationship. And this, let me just explain here. Like, when you're in the honeymoon period of a relationship, right? And let's just call it what it is. You're having a lot of awesome sex. There are little things that your partner does that, you know, might irritate you, or they might be incorrect, you know, personality flaws, little things they do wrong, but you don't care because the sex life is good, right? But once your sex life starts to erode in a relationship, all the things that you don't like about your partner, all the things you don't like about this person, they start to boil up and become more prominent. And if the relationship between Star Wars properties and stories and the fans is a sex life, man, it is just not a good sex life right now. Not making either party very happy. And because of what we just talked about, we are sure to be demonetized, or at the very least not make a lot of money on this video. So please consider going and checking out our Patreon so that, you know, we don't have to shut up shop. This ad for the Patreon is brought to you by Weird Sex Life Analogies. And so to summarize my take where Star Wars is at and why we got here is they fumbled, absolutely fumbled, the passing of the baton between the old nostalgic characters and the new characters. And because of that, it created a disconnect between audiences and the property, and all of the cracks, all of the flaws of Star Wars as a brand that existed, to be fair, before Disney even bought it. Yeah, all of those flaws come way more to the forefront, and they become the focus of the thing. And because Star Wars as a brand is not winning, we are not bringing a lot of new people to the brand, and because the sex life, which essentially is just, you know, how fans are feeling from the Star Wars property, because the sex life's not good, all of the cracks and the flaws of the Star Wars brand are being focused on. But again, that's just my personal take. I'm just some dude on the internet. Let me know what you think about all of these things in the comment section below. Now again, I want to reiterate, I'm actually positive on Star Wars, and the bottom line here is that Star Wars Episode 9 is a huge moment for this brand. It is going to be very impactful, and based upon how this movie does and is accepted by audiences, Star Wars brand's gonna go one of two ways. It's either gonna get back on track and start to rise up to the levels where we want it to be, or it's going to go down even further, and there's going to be some major recalibration over at Lucasfilm, and Star Wars will just go in a different direction. Now, either way, I think Star Wars is fine. As I said, it will always have a draw, and all they have to do is make awesome movies with awesome characters, and the brand will get right back to where it needs to be. But make no mistake, guys, the Star Wars brand is not in a great place. Star Wars Episode 9 is going to make or break this franchise in a lot of different ways. And I think Star Wars Episode 9 is going to be great. I think it's going to fix a lot of different things in the fandom, and we're going to be winning again. The sex life's going to be good. Winners bringing new fans in. Beautiful stuff is coming for Star Wars Episode 9. That's my prediction. Now let's check the nerd card before we get out of here. I want to know, what planet did Emperor Palpatine come from in the galaxy? Kind of an obvious one, but maybe you don't know this. What planet is Emperor Palpatine from? Answer that question in the comment section below. Oh, and real quick, earlier today, I dropped the first produced video from our new executive producer, Ryan H. It's an awesome video all about the Shang-Chi movie, The Legends of the Ten Rings, and how it will lead us to Dark Avengers, because I can't stop making videos about the Dark Avengers. So if you're interested, go check that video out. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.